Let's start with this developing story. The Special Tribunal has declared the decision by the Free State Treasury and Health to award a surgical gowns tender invalid and unlawful.
The 39.1 million rand tender was awarded to 32 service providers to supply the gowns in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The SIU approached the tribunal to review and set aside the tender after its investigation revealed that the products were of inferior quality.
Now, only 3 service providers supplied surgical gowns that satisfied the tender specifications. The tribunal has ordered the service providers to return any profit they've made.
And if the department suffers any financial losses as a result of the tender, those will be recovered from the responsible officials. And this is, again, tender irregularities and illegalities on top of already everything else that has been uncovered.
I tell you what, the story boggles the mind. Let's try and make sense of it then. Joining me now to discuss this is the spokesperson of the Special Tribunal, Advocate Selby Makgotho. Advocate, thank you so much for your time. You know, when one reads exactly what is going on here, your head really is spinning. But I'd like us to begin with, this particular matter. I mean, it could be precedent setting, especially when it comes to the delivery of substandard work. Because I remember in 2020, we saw SAPRA coming out talking about an investigation that really, was getting underway to look at what, is being provided when it comes to PPE.
Good evening, Sisbongiwe. Good evening to the viewers. Indeed, thank you for having me. I would say that quite a number of our matters are precedent setting. You'll recall that since the establishment of the Special Tribunal, but most importantly during the advent of COVID-19, in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic, the Special Tribunal has been inundated with applications by the Special Investigating Unit to review and set aside quite a number of contracts arising out of allegations of unlawfulness, irregularities, various contraventions with the constitutional, legislative, and other statutory provisions. So today what transpired briefly is that it was a judgment day for the SIU and the MEC for Provincial Treasury in the Free State and others. Quite a number of findings were made adversely to the effect that the contracts holistically 39.1 million is reviewed and set aside. What has been the finding in this particular instance is that at the very formulative foundational phase, the contract, the supplies in particular of the surgical gowns was defective. They were substandard. And ultimately, only 3 of the 36 had complied with the specifications, the technical aspects thereof. Hence, they were exonerated. But in the ultimate, the SIU has now been ordered to go and compile an audit report in the form of an independent expert who will then come and do a thorough assessment of the surgical gowns and come back to the Special Tribunal with a confirmatory report that shows that either they are happy or they are not. But based on the evidence that has been laid before the Special Tribunal, the contract is now reviewed, set aside, and the monies that have been paid, that is 9.5 million, is now ordered to be paid back to the state. And what is now left, the 23 or something million, should not be paid. Because now the contract is null and void. And
I'm going to go into the issue of the officials that also must cover the difference in just a moment. But the fact that substandard, gowns, surgical gowns were even, given to the department or even delivered, if I can use that word, that in itself is quite damning, especially when you look at what the tribunal had to say, that this casts doubt on the fact that some assessment could have been done here, because the department is arguing that it was shown one gown and something else was delivered. But really, there should have been some checks and balances that what has been shown is exactly what was delivered.
I agree. One of the findings that we made is that there was no adherence. The checks and balances were not in place, not implemented, because there were no checks. Those things, the surgical gowns that were delivered were of such a poor quality. They were delivered in normal handbags. They were not accredited or authorized by any medical authority. So it was just a question of malicious compliance. That is what the finding is. And as a special tribunal, our posture is that the relief sought should be proportionate to the financial damage caused. In the end, given that the order is actually quite emphatic in the sense that even the accounting officers, that is the heads of the department, should take cognizance of the fact that there has been contraventions in as far as the Public Finance Management Act is concerned. They need to revoke certain provisions to correct and reverse those irregularities.
I wonder how much of an impact is this going to have going forward, especially when it comes to the monies that these companies need to pay back. I know that there's also like some R1, per surgical gown, but I'm keen to find out because the delivery process was so chaotic when you read even what the court has to say that you could not even link a delivery to a specific company because some of these boxes were not marked, and therefore the department itself could not even say who the boxes come from. I wonder how much of an impact, if any, that is going to have on the monies that need to be paid back.
The process, as you correctly described it, was quite chaotic because now the order does indicate that one of the things that need to happen is that each service provider needs to come and identify his or her box of the surgical gowns for the purpose of that independent expert opinion that we have directed that it needs to be compiled. But then the order is very, very quite clear, and it actually coaches that should there be any problem with the service providers, if ever they feel that they need to bring in their expert opinions as well, that is granted, provided there is an agreement that is approved by the special tribunal that is endorsed thereof, so that there is no confusion. One of the things is that you look at the handbags that were used to put in some of the surgical gowns. You could see that it was just a question of this is a tender. People needed to come in, but at the end of the day, it's taxpayers' money, and we have got a duty, once it is proven to us that there is a problem where the money has not been properly spent, then it is our duty to call back and reverse that money, and that is exactly the stage where we are. The chaos and the other referrals that have been made to the accounting officers, it is the court order, and it has to be executed and implemented, and there should be consequences for those implicated officials.
Talking about consequence management, is there anything that's stopping the hawks now to act on what the special tribunal has found?
There is nothing wrong stopping any other law enforcement agency, provided they do pick up any need for further investigation. But in this particular case, there is a prima facie evidence, is what actually the special tribunal did find, that where there are referrals, they need to be made. The Hawks, the NPA, or any other law enforcement agency for that matter, needs to come in. Because one of the things that we did find was that there was a bit of resistance on the part of the provincial government of the Free State in their answering affidavit, because they did not necessarily appreciate the SIU's involvement. They opposed that on the basis that they should have used the Promotion of Access to Information Act to source or obtain whatever information that they needed. But we found that it was not legally sound. Hence, we found that it was sustainable because the course of action falls within our jurisdiction. Hence, we proceeded with the hearing. So there were quite a number of things along the way, because the case was, for instance, heard on the 25th of August last year, and the manner in which some of the respondents were behaving leading to the judgment day itself concerned us as a special tribunal, and we will be following on those things up.
All right, and we'll certainly track and see as you follow up what then are you going to do about that. But thank you so much for your time. We'll have to leave it there for now. That was the spokesperson for the Special Tribunal, Advocate Selby Makgotho.